All right, let's go ahead and get started. Can you guys hear me okay? Great. All right, well, welcome to our week 2 live session recording. I want to start off by just saying I got all the grading finished for week 1, for everything that had been submitted for week 1 yesterday afternoon. So definitely go in there and take a look at your grades, but not only that, you want to click on the grade itself and you want to read the comments. And it's not just the general comments, but there are specific comments in the rubric. So when you're looking at the rubric, that's where it breaks it down by how many, what parts are worth what points. And that's where I wrote specific feedback if you missed any points for anything. And like I said last week, if you did miss points for something, then you are definitely invited to revise your submission based upon that feedback that's in the rubric, and then to resubmit that. And when you do that, then I will regrade it and I will adjust your score. Now, I do all the grading, like I said last week, on Mondays. So any revisions or resubmissions would be graded next Monday, and then you'd see the increase in your score at that time from any of the issues that were fixed. Now, if anyone is late on their week 1 assignment, again, definitely can still submit that. It's absolutely worth the time and effort. It's there are some points for a late submission, but most of the points are still available to go towards your score. But not only that, part of the grade for our week 2 assignment is based upon having corrected any issues that were in the week 1 assignment. Okay, so you need my grade, need my feedback in order to get full credit on the week 2 assignment. So because of that, like I said, I don't actually go in and do any additional grading on my own until Monday of next week. So if you submit an assignment late from week 1, please send me an email. Please send me an email just saying, hey, I got my week 1 assignment submitted, so that I know to go in and grade that quickly so that you can have that feedback available for your week 2 assignment. And then, of course, I generally don't work on weekends, so please get that in as early in the week as possible if you are missing your week 1 assignment, so that I can get you that feedback. Because if it comes in in the afternoon on Friday or sometime on Saturday, then it's not going to get graded before the week 2 is due, and those points are going to be missed. Okay. So any questions on that at all before we move forward? Oh yes, I actually just saw your email, Jan. I was gonna respond to you on that, but yeah, since because of your issue with the repair, that's fine. You don't need to worry about that. I can definitely work with you on that. Yeah, I just hadn't had a chance to respond yet. All right. Well, before we go forward any further with what we're going to do this week, let's jump in and take a look at our announcements real quick. All right. So the main one I want to point out here this week is that I've added in our learning coaches schedule for week 2. Okay. So if you jump in there, you can see that Christy's going to be available on Wednesday from 12 to 7 Mountain Time, and then Thursday from 12 to 5 Mountain Time. And then her contact information is here in here as well. And then, of course, we're going to be doing our multi-session just like usual on Thursday from 12:30 p.m. Mountain Time to 2:30 p.m. Mountain Time. So you can come in and get some one-on-one help from me during that time if you need to. And then we're going to have all the other multi-sessions as well that are hosted by other instructors. And again, that schedule's here in this 100-level multi-session schedule Mod 9 announcement. Okay, so if you need any one-on-one help with the work for this week, there's plenty available. And this week, we're going to be digging into a little more of the technical capabilities of InDesign. First of all, we're going to talk about something called the principles of design. And the principles of design are just they're 4 general principles upon which really all of our other design techniques and things that you're going to learn going forward for your degree are based upon. We're going to go through those real quick, and I've got a couple of short videos, well, actually 4 short videos, one for each principle to show you that are going to illustrate those. Then we're going to dig into what are called style sheets. Now, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, just in case anyone jumps in and watches the recording and does, maybe doesn't have time to watch the whole thing at once. You're definitely going to want to watch that part, because a huge part of the week 2 assignment is based on doing style sheets correctly. Okay, 30 points. So a fourth of the points for that assignment are based on doing the style sheets correctly. So I'm going to go down and we're going to talk about exactly what they are. We're going to talk about exactly how to use them, how to create them, and I'm going to do a demonstration, a couple of demonstrations really, on using them. So that'll get you everything you need in order to get those done for week 2's assignment. And again, that's a huge part of the score for the week 2 assignment. And it's also just a hugely powerful tool, something that's going to be very, very useful to you in many of your courses and in your career going forward. After that, we're going to do kind of a walkthrough of our discussion and our assignment and our assessment for this week, just as usual, and that'll have some, that's where we'll be doing some of our demonstrations as well. Okay. So let's start off by talking about the principles of design. Now, these principles are going to come up over and over and over again when you're in your courses. Okay, and there's a reason for that. They seem simple, or relatively simple in the beginning, but they are extremely expansive. The ways in which we utilize them and the ways in which we need to be thinking about them just grow and grow and grow as we learn more about graphic design and as we expand in our own skills as designers. But these 4 basic principles are things that we need to be thinking about all of the time when we're doing our designs. We need to be thinking about how they apply to every part of our design, to every element within our design. And just like any rules, sometimes we may decide to break one of the rules, one of these principles of design. But when we do so, it should be based upon having a full knowledge of what that principle is, a full knowledge of why that principle is important, and a full knowledge of what breaking it will do, and actually wanting to have that result. Again, it's an exception to the rule. Generally, you're going to follow these, but sometimes you may want the result of breaking these, and in that case, they're going to work for you in that way as well. But the most important thing is to really have a strong understanding of what they are, and to be thinking about them very consistently in everything that we're doing in our work. Now, we're going to be just touching on them in this course. We're going to be looking at the beginnings of them. But you'll be, like I said, you'll get into them very heavily in your Design 109 course, which is the Graphic Design 1. And they're going to come up over and over and over again throughout your courses and throughout your career because of how important they are. So the 4 basic principles of design that we're going to look at are contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. Okay, and the acronym you're going to hear all the time is CRAP: contrast, repetition, alignment, or proximity. Occasionally you'll hear someone say CARP, someone who doesn't like saying crap, but generally they're referred to as CRAP, the CRAP principles, and you'll hear that reference quite often. So we're going to go through them one at a time. And a few years ago, I created some short videos, like right around 1 minute each, on each one of these. And so we're going to watch those videos as well. I'm just pulling them up right now on my other screen so I have them ready to go. There we are. For each one of them. Okay, so let's start with contrast. Okay. So contrast, what it means in its essence is change or difference. Okay, so contrast can be a change in size, it can be a change in color, it can be a change in direction, it can be a change in typeface, it can be a change in weight, which is going to be thickness when we're talking about design, and change really in anything. Okay, and those changes, what they do is they bring an emphasis to something, or they create a focal point, they draw your eye, they allow us to make something stand out, and therefore show some level of importance to it. Okay, so before we talk about it anymore, I'm going to show you this little video on contrast, And just tell me, this is the first time I've played these videos on this computer that I'm working on right now. So if you can do me a favor and just write in the comments if you can hear the audio. There's no one talking, it's just music, but just let me know if you can hear the audio when it gets going. Here we go. Okay, so that's contrast. And once you start to recognize or look for contrast, you're going to notice that it's all over the place. It's utilized in everything that is designed that we look at, right? Just looking at my screen right now, we can see a lot of examples of contrast. For example, this ribbon area at the top of PowerPoint is this bright orange, right? Now that bright orange contrasts heavily with the white or light gray background of a blank sheet in PowerPoint, or with this menu bar up at the top. So our eye gets drawn to that bright orange where we know that we have a lot of controls, right? And then the text on that bright orange and the buttons on that bright orange are that light gray, so that they are very different from that bright orange. They're quite a bit lighter, and then two, they are very lacking in color, right? They're not bright, they're not colorful at all. And that makes it so that we can very easily see them. We can very easily go through them and look at what we're looking for. Now, if I open one of these ribbons, you'll notice that the tab that I opened is now that light gray, and the text on it is that bright orange. So now this tab is very different from all of the other tabs. This tab, rather than having this orange background and the white text, or the light gray text, has the light gray background and the orange text. So very, very easy for me to just glance and see exactly which tab I have open. Okay. If you go down to my slide itself, you can see that the text is that much lighter than the background. If it wasn't much lighter than the background, it'd be difficult to read. Also, you'll see that my headline is quite a bit bigger than the text below it, and that tells us that that's the headline. That draws our eye to this to read first, right? So contrast is something that you're going to see all over the place, and again, it's utilized to make text readable. First of all, with text, contrast is extremely important, or it's very difficult to read. But it's also utilized to make focal points and to draw our attention to places. So here are some examples of different kinds of contrast. We've got contrast in size, contrast in position, right, where this one's shifted over to the right a little bit, a contrast in color, a contrast in texture, a contrast in shape, and a contrast in orientation, where this one is rotated a little bit. And what I want you to notice is when you look at each of these groups, the one that contrasts is the one that wants to pull your eye to it. The one that contrasts is like a magnet for our eyes. It's what we want to look at, what we want to notice when we look at these groups. And we as designers want to use that. We as designers want to use contrast in order to pull people's attention to the places where we want that attention to go. And we want to be careful that we don't have contrast pulling people's attention to places that we don't want their attention to go, right? Pulling people's attention away from the important places. Okay. So that's contrast. Any questions at all about the general concept of contrast as a design principle? All right. Well, so our next one is well, actually, sorry, I forgot. I have one more slide here, and then I'm going to go back and show you something. The last one. This has to do with contrast with text, and the reason for this one is to point out that sometimes, well, you need to look at more than just contrasting colors. There are other aspects of contrast that are important. In this case, it's brightness, right, or value is what you call that. So we've got this first choice here, where the red and the green are they're totally different colors. It's not like you can't see that green on the red background. However, because they're both so bright, this is going to be a bad choice. It's going to kind of hurt our eyes a little bit when we're trying to read it, especially if we have a lot of text. It's going to make it so that it's kind of overwhelming us, right, as far as how bright it is. In the middle one here, we have a bad choice for the fact that the colors are just too similar, right? We've got this blue, and we've got another blue over the top of it. And yeah, I can see it, but it's not drawing my attention. And if it was a lot of text, it would be difficult to read. Now over here, we've got these two, and they're both green. So we're not contrasting as far as the hue, as far as the general color. However, we've got this darker muted green for a background and this nice bright green for our text. And that's making it so that it's actually quite legible and quite nice on our eyes. So the contrast in value or brightness is what is making this third one a good choice. Okay. Now, the next one we're going to talk about is repetition. And I want to point something out here. Going back to this little bunch of examples I gave you on contrast, I want you to notice that the thing that makes the contrast work here is the repetition, right? If we just had a small square and a big square, yeah, they would contrast with each other. They'd be different, but our eyes might be drawn to either one because they're both different from each other. But when we have three small squares, which is our repetition, three that are the same, and one big square, that makes it so that our eye goes to the one that's different, the contrasting one. So contrast and repetition work hand in hand. They're very, very closely related in what we do with design. We need to set the stage with the repetition so that the contrasting elements stand out and draw your attention to them. Okay. So repetition, it represents consistency within a design. And sometimes this is a little bit of a change in thinking, because a lot of times when we hear the word repetition or repetitive outside of the design world, it's in a negative context, as in like, oh, it's just so repetitive, it's just over and over and over again, I'm bored. And in design, I mean, yeah, you could definitely be overly repetitive and have it be boring, but the reality is that repetition is extremely important for us and is very, very useful in creating a coherent and a design that communicates what we want it to communicate. Okay, so we repeat elements so the design is cohesive, meaning so the whole design goes together. We want it clear that all the parts of this design are part of a whole, and repetition helps us to do that. Some things we might repeat are typefaces, sizes, colors, leading. Those are used consistently to create a visual harmony, a unity, and a harmony within a design. So today, when we're doing the menu, for example, we're going to talk about how we don't want to have a different font size or a different font for the names of all the items in our menu. Now, is that a never? No. There may be times when that would work for a specific type of audience and a specific part of project, but generally, we want to have a repetition amongst all the names of our food items so that it's very clear and easy for people to see what things are the names. We want to have a repetition of the formatting for all of the categories like pasta or just drinks, right? So that it's really clear and easy to scan through the menu and see what are all the categories. Anything, we kind of, we designate what the different types of text are that we have, and we choose a font formatting for that, and then we repeat it. We use that repetition to our advantage to help create a legend, to create a map of sorts of our design, so it's easy to get through. Now, here's jumping forward there. Here's a magazine spread that has some good examples of repetition, but at the same time, it has some good examples of using repetition in ways that are still interesting and make it enjoyable to look at. For example, we've got all these shapes, and some of them are thicker, and some of them, and they're different colors from each other. However, they're all the same type of shape. They're all a parallelogram, right? And so that parallelogram feeling becomes a motif for this magazine article. It's very clear that this page and these pages are part of the same article because we're seeing these parallelograms repeat throughout them. Also with text formatting, when we're looking at these pull quotes, they all have this bolder text, and they all have these thick black bars on the top and the bottom of them. Now, over here, they're a little bit smaller than this one is. That's because this one spans and block further on the page. And so this one draws our attention more. There's some contrast there. However, it's clear that these are the same things because of the bold text and those lines on the top and bottom. On this page, it's white, not black, but it's contrasting with the background of the page, just like these ones are. And again, that bold text and the white lines are helping us to know these are the same type of a thing. And then we have our body text that's all formatted the same, but then we have this smaller text that helps us to know this is something different. I would know not to read, like for example, I would know not to read this first column, then jump to this little tiny middle one, because I would know this is something different. Otherwise, it wouldn't be smaller than this. You know, I would know this column continues over here, where it's the same, excuse me, and that this is probably additional information that's being put in there along with the actual article itself. Now, this is a fairly complicated example. There's a lot going on here. But in cases like that, repetition becomes even more important because with so much going on, it'd be very easy to get lost and to not know where you're going without having repeating text formats and colors to guide us through it. So let's watch a real quick video on repetition here. Okay, so that's repetition. And again, it's something, the repetition is a big part of our initial plan for the design. We think about what elements do we want to really speak for what this design is, and then how do we want, and then how do we want to utilize those elements? And then we just repeat that utilization unless we're planning on doing a specific contrast in order to draw attention, like I said earlier. So any questions at all on repetition? All right. That leads us to our next one then, which is alignment. Okay. I'm just going to start off with the video on alignment here, and then we'll talk about it some more. All right. So alignment is one that I can tell you it's one that seems fairly simple at first, but that I noticed in the beginning, it's easy to not think about it in all cases. Like to think, okay, well, I want these to align, but then to not really notice that other things on your design aren't aligning, don't really have any alignment. And alignment is something that kind of brings the design together to make it feel like all part of a whole. Now, for example, you'll notice that here, I've got this left alignment of these elements, and it goes down to this image here. And then these images align on the top and the bottom. And so it's the alignment of these two images, top and bottom, that make this vertical image look like it has any alignment at all to this text. If it was just by itself, it would feel kind of just thrown on there. But I've got this horizontal image aligned with the text, and I've got the vertical image aligned with the horizontal image. And in general, you want to be thinking about that. How do all of the different elements of my page align with each other in order to bring this all together as part of a whole, rather than just things thrown on a page? Okay. Now, alignment's vitally important for graphic design because it allows you to arrange elements in a way that matches the way people naturally scan the page. We're going to naturally view through things in lines going up and down, side to side. It helps balance your image so that it's visually appealing, and it creates a visual connection between related elements. Okay. Now, that last one I want to make a specific point of. In that video, I showed a part where a person's eye was lined up and if some text was brought down in line to the eye. If you've got two things that have to do with each other, but then aligning them will subconsciously tell people these have to do with each other, right? And that helps us to make connections and to guide people through our design in the way that we want them to go through it. Now, we've got two types of alignment that are shown here. We have a horizontal alignment where things align on the left or on the right or both. And then vertical alignment is when things align on the top or on the bottom or both. Okay. And here's a few basic alignments you'll see. There's edge alignments. This one's aligning on the left and on the top, or it could be on the right and bottom, doesn't matter, but you're getting it aligned on the edges. Okay. Center alignment is where you get aligned through the center. Here we've got one, visual alignment. This is one that's a little more advanced, but the more you work with things, you're going to start to notice this. Sometimes doing an actual technical alignment doesn't actually look aligned to us, doesn't look right. So in this case, that word visual is perfectly left aligned with the text below it. But the problem is there's this huge loop going out off the left side of that V. And it makes the V feel not quite aligned with the text below it. So here they've cheated that to the left a little bit. And even though it's not technically aligned anymore, it feels aligned. In fact, if I was doing this, I'd probably cheat it even more to the left than that. But sometimes you have to, go with your own instincts of what feels aligned versus technically being aligned. And then here we've got misaligned text, and misaligned text creates a focal point. So this is using contrast and repetition again in order to draw your attention to something that isn't aligned. Okay. So we're going to be doing a lot with alignment as well today. But our last one we're going to look at is proximity. And proximity is the one that I see students struggle with the most. And I think it's because it's a very simple concept, and I think that there's a tendency to want to complicate it more than it is. But it really is pretty straightforward. All proximity means is that things that go together should be together. Okay? If something is in concept or in meaning related to each other, put them physically near each other as well. And then not only that, put a little bit of space between those things and something that isn't directly related to those things in order to show that too. These aren't directly related, and that's why there's some space between them. So we're using physical space in order to create a sense of meaning between things that are related and things that are not related. Okay? So we've got these business card examples here, and this first one here, for example, it's following the idea of alignment. It's following the ideas of contrast. It's following the ideas of repetition. we've got Joe's graphic, and we've got these things in the corners, but because it's not following the rules of proximity, there's not a lot of meaning being created here, okay? Where we look at the second design and we have, you know, Joe's graphics, the name of it nice and big. We've got the address, and the address is close together, right? These lines are near each other. Then there's some gap, and then we have contact information down here, phone number and email address, and those are close together. So here's ways to get a hold of me, but it's a little separate from here's where I'm located, okay? And that proximity helps to give that meaning. So let's watch the video on proximity real quick. Okay, so that's proximity. Is everyone clear on what I mean by it? Any questions on proximity? All right. So here we have an example of a menu, okay? And what I want you to notice is that those four principles that we just discussed are all over the place in this menu. So first of all, let's talk about contrast and repetition, okay? And we're gonna kind of talk about them together. I want you to notice, and mentioned this earlier, so we've got these category names, right? Hot sandwiches, cold sandwiches, salads, pastas, entrees, and comida mexicana. Now, when we sit down at a menu, naturally what we tend to do is scan these categories to kind of see what we're in the mood for, right? I might go on here, oh, no, not hot sandwiches. Oh, pasta, that sounds pretty good. And then I'll go in and look through the pastas, right? And so by having these categories contrast like this, to have them be larger and contrasting with the rest of the text, makes it so that it's easy for me to spot them. It draws my eyes to them. But also, by having them all be exactly the same, so utilizing repetition, it also makes it easy for me to see where the next one is, right? To jump right from one to the next. It helps to guide me through the menu. The same sort of thing happens when we get down into the menu descriptions themselves. We've got the menu names are all a bit larger than the menu descriptions. There's also a little bit of a right indent happening with the menu description that shifts the alignment a little bit. So all the menu categories and names are all left aligned, and then all the menu descriptions are left aligned too, but they're a little bit off alignment from the rest of it to contrast them, right? Any of the elements that have separate purchases, like this on the Caesar salad, it says add chicken or beef $2.50 underneath it. That's in this red to contrast. So I know anytime I see that little bit of red under an item, this is going to cost me a little more money, right? It's an option I can pay for if I want. Anytime I see the red underneath the category, it tells me what things that comes with. Okay, served with homemade hanger chips and a pickle, right? So that said, there's one thing on this page that contrasts with everything else on it, and so is clearly something they want to make sure that everyone sees. Can you guys see what that is? What on this menu is contrasting with all the rest of the menu? The red rectangle, exactly right. So if you look at what that red rectangle is, Add French fries, fruit salad, or cucumber salad and a fountain drink to any order for $2.50. Okay. So first of all, it applies to all the orders. It's not something they would want to put in each section because it applies to all of them. Secondly, it makes the restaurant more money, right? That's an add-on purchase. It's going to make them more money if you do it. So they want to make sure that everyone sees this. So they make a red rectangle. They put the lighter text in that rectangle and make it contrast with everything else so that people are much, much more likely to notice it and to read it, no matter which of these categories they were picking their food from. Okay. Now, we also see in here proximity, right? We've got each section is grouped together, but they're all a little bit spaced out and separate from the other sections. Okay. Also, each of the food items have a little bit of space between them as well. Oh, no problem, Jen. Just make sure and watch the recording when you can. Thanks for coming while you could, though. And so there, that the little bit of space between these items helps us to know where, what the whole description of the item is. And then the little bit of space between sections helps us to know when we're going to leave one section and go to another. Okay. So those are the 4 principles of design. And again, you want to get in the habit of thinking about those in every single thing that you are working on. And get in the habit that way of looking at them and things that you see around you too. When you see posters, when you see packaging, when you see something like that, try to ask yourself why the designer would have made the decisions that they did in relation to these principles. Why do they have these things contrast? Why do they have these things align? And it'll help you to become a better designer yourself. So any questions at all on the principles of design? All right. So let's talk next about style sheets. And I'm actually just going to open up. Well, actually, before we jump to style sheets, I'm going to show you one very common problem that I see with the principle of proximity. And then we're going to look at style sheets because they're actually very closely related. All right. I'm going to create a new document here. And in this document, I'm going to put some text. And I want to have a couple of headers. So I'm going to just drop these down to the next line. All right. So we're going to pretend that these are supposed to be subheads or headings. So I'm gonna format them in a way that contrasts them from the rest of my text. So it's very clear that that's what those are. Now, part of the thing I want to do before we jump into styles, and we're going to start this with this, is I want to talk about the paragraph panel, the rest of the paragraph panel. We just talked about the alignment formatting for the rest of the paragraph panel. We're going to go through the rest of it now. In order to demonstrate what I want to talk about now, though, we're going to jump down to this part right here. It's called space before and space after. Okay? These are the ways that you want to add spacing between paragraphs or of text. What you don't want to do is press return for extra space. Now, there's a couple of reasons you don't want to press return for extra space. And I'm going to give you a caveat for that because some of the examples and samples that we do in this class do press return for extra space. So again, it's not like it's never done. It is done sometimes, but it's better not to, because if you use these, it's actually a part of the formatting. So, a return is considered a character. It's just like if I typed an X, only rather than putting an X there, it puts a line of space for me. The downside to that is a couple of things. One, I don't have as much control over how big that return is, right? That extra space. I can go in and change fonts and lettings and try to control that to a degree. It's a lot of work. And then the other downside is that since it's just a character, it will be replaced if I ever replace that text. So let's say like this right now, I'm using placeholder text. If I got this all formatted the way I wanted and then I copied and pasted the real text into here, all of my little returns that I put in would disappear. But if I use this paragraph formatting and add space with these, it'll still be there, because this tells this text frame, I always want you to have a certain amount of space after every paragraph, or a certain amount of space before every paragraph. And that's kind of locked in as the formatting. So if I go, when I'm selecting the entire text box like this, it's gonna just, these are gonna do the same thing, right? If I add space, you'll see it's putting space between any of them. And if I do the same thing with the after, it's just putting space between any of them. Same exact thing either way. But if I select a specific line or put my cursor on a line, then it does just what it says it's going to do. This puts space before the paragraph. This puts space after the paragraph. Okay? So that's what we want to do to add space before and after paragraphs. So let's just say that I've decided I want to have some space, after each of these paragraphs. I'm going to come here and just add in this much space after each paragraph. And then let's say that I'm like, and I actually, after the subheadings, I want to have this much space. Okay? So I've done something wrong here. I've broken the rule of proximity, the principle of proximity. Can you guys see why? Can you guys see what I've done that is breaking the principle of proximity? Keep in mind, so again, the principle of proximity is that things that go together are closer together. Exactly. You don't know which paragraph has to do with. Now, logically, I do. Logically, I know that the way you read the paragraph underneath the headline is the one that headline is about. But as far as the rules of design, I'm saying something different here. These headlines are closer to the paragraph above them than they are to the paragraph below them. So inherently, it makes us feel like these two go together. The headline and the one above it feel like they should go together rather than the headline and the paragraph below it. Now, I see this a lot. It's a very, very common mistake. So you just always want to make sure when you're doing things like this that you are putting the headlines or the category names or the item names, whatever it is, closer to the thing that they relate to than they are to what's above them. Okay? Does that make sense? All right. So that's one type of formatting that I have in here. There's a few other things I can do in here that are very useful. This one here is a left indent. Okay? So if I increase this here, it moves the text away from the left side of the text box, right? So now I had the whole text box selected that time, so it did everything. But if I just select a particular thing, then it's just going to move that particular thing, right? So that can help with like quotes or things like that. This one here pushes away from the right side. Okay, so we've got left indent and we've got right indent next to that. Now, our next one is another one. It's kind of like when I was talking about pressing returns for extra space. The next one is one that is very commonly faked, and this faking is a carryover from typewriters, and you don't want to do it. And that is a first line indent. It's very common for people to do a first line indent by hitting tab at the beginning of a new line. Okay. Now, there's a couple of problems with that. One problem is this is actually way too big of an indent for a column this thick, okay? We've got this huge half-inch indent that the tab made, and we don't want one that big. Secondly, just like with the returns, that is a character. It's not formatting, which means if I were to copy and paste some other text in here, I would no longer have a first line indent. I have to go back through all my paragraphs and put them in one at a time, right? But rather than do that, I can just select my text here, and I can go right here in the paragraph panel, and this one, just the second one down on the left, is first line indent. And I can just increase that to whatever I would like my first line indent to be, and it will put it at the beginning of every single line. Now, I don't want it at the beginning of my headlines, so I would probably come here and grab that and get rid of the first line indent on that. And we're going to look at, you're going to see in a minute how styles can be very useful to that. But this is how we're going to want to do first line indents, is using our first line indent function here in the paragraph panel. Okay, and the one on the right is a last line indent. It basically doesn't let the last line of text get to a certain distance from the end. I've honestly never even had cause to use that, but just so you know, that's what it does. It just keeps the last line from getting to a certain distance from the right edge of the text box. So that's a great question. Is there a specific measurement for a first line indent? There are guidelines based upon the thickness of your column. So a lot of times the size of your text for thickness of your column can make a big difference in that. I'd say that in general, when doing normal body text, something like this, which is 10 or 11 points, I tend to not go any bigger than 1/4 of an inch, and I rarely go to 1/4 of an inch. I'm usually more like an 1/8 of an inch for first line indent on a column that's like this. But you'll learn as you get into typography that there are more, like there's kind of guidelines based upon the size of your text, the width of your column, that sort of thing. And on that note, it's always the best idea to have at least one or the other, either space between the paragraphs or a first line indent to designate where one paragraph starts and another ends. So one or the two is a good thing to have, definitely when you're doing body text like this. All right, so we've already done the space before and the space after. Let's move down to this one here. The bottom one on the left of these type of controls is what's called a drop cap. Now, drop cap is a very, very important thing when we're doing newspapers, when we're doing books, when we're doing magazines. I'm sure you've seen it a lot. It's another thing people try to fake sometimes, but it's so much easier to just do it the right way. And this allows me to drop down the first letter of a word of a certain amount of lines of text, okay? So this first control of it is how many lines of text do I want it to drop? So I said I want it to drop 3 lines of text, and you'll see now the O takes up 3 lines of text, okay? The second controller is how many letters do I want to drop? So sometimes we may want to do a whole word, right? Other times, just a single letter, a couple letters, whatever we want to do. But that's what these two controls are for, are to give you that drop cap. Okay, any questions on drop caps? All right. Now I'm going to skip these two. You will very rarely use them, but just briefly, this one shading fills in the background behind text, and this one border puts a border on the text. There are other ways to do that usually, but that's what those do. But I do want to look at this one, hyphenate, okay? So I want you to notice, I've got let's see, there's this word right here is hyphenated, M-O, and then it goes from there. There's not really any other ones, but this is, there's one up there. InDesign is set, if this box is checked, it will automatically try to hyphenate words that it can. If I uncheck that, it will not allow any words to hyphenate. It'll just make sure the whole word is there and drop the next one to the next line. Whether you use one or the other has a lot to do with the style guide of who you are creating things for. A lot of publications or business or things have a rule for that. They'll say, we never hyphenate, or we have no problem with hyphenating. And you just would check or uncheck that box accordingly, and InDesign will take care of it for you. Okay? So that's the rest of the paragraph panel. Any questions at all on the paragraph panel? All right. Well, so let's go ahead and let's take a break now then. And then when we come back from our break, we will take a look at styles, both paragraph styles and character styles. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set a timer. And we'll do a 15-minute break. Go ahead and just, stretch your legs, get something to drink, whatever you need to do. And we'll get started again in 15. All right, we are back. Can you guys hear me again? Okay, perfect. So the next thing we're going to talk about then is styles. And like I said, this is the thing that is going to be a fourth of your grade on these week 2 menus. So we definitely want to make sure that we're getting this right. And please let me know if there's anything about this that is not making sense or that you'd like some clarification on. So I'm going to start off by just creating some text here. I'm going to create one text box, and I'm going to fill that with placeholder text. And then I'm going to hit escape, and I'm just going to create a second box over here and do the same thing. Fill this with placeholder text. Okay. So here I have these two text boxes filled with placeholder text. Now, let's go ahead and give both of these a couple of headers. And just, you'll probably notice I'm going to go right through the floor with these. You're going to have the red X, the red plus sign down there telling me there's not enough room in the text box. I'm not going to worry about this for that demonstration, but again, always keep your eye out for that when you're doing your own work. I'm just going to call this header 1. And this one's going to be header 2. Now, obviously, I would have real text here if I was doing this for real, but I just want to do this to save time. And here's header 3. And over here, I'm going to do the same thing. Header 1, header 2, and header 3. Okay, so let's say that to start off with, I'm just kind of looking at this body text, and I'm trying to see how I would like to align this. And so I'm going to I could just do this one paragraph at a time, or I could select all, and it's going to reformat the headers too, but I would worry about changing those in a minute. I think I'll do it this way. I'm going to put my cursor in there. I'm hitting Command A on my keyboard, or you can hit Control A if you're on a Windows computer, or you can go up to Edit, and it is Select All right here. So I've got all my text selected, and I'm just going to play around with the formatting. So let's go in here, and, one other way I could do this, rather than selecting all that way, if I want to see the text not inverted, I can just select the text box. Let's do it that way. That way, though, we have to go to our character panel instead of our control panel. I'm going to change my body text, and I'm going to say that I want it to be Iowan Old Style. Okay. And I'm going to say that I'd like it to be a little smaller than 12. Let's go with an 11. My leading, let's open up the leading a little bit. Maybe put it at a 14. And then I'd like this to have a little bit of space between each of the paragraphs. So I'm going to go to my paragraph panel, and I'm just going to add a little bit of space between each one like that. Okay. And now I'm feeling like, okay, that looks pretty good. I like the idea of that being my my body style. Now let's look at how I want to format my headers. And I'm going to say, well, I don't really want the space between the header and the body style, so I'm going to go get rid of that extra space there. And I'm going to go to my character panel, and I'm going to pick a different font for this. Maybe for this, I'd like to go with Helvetica. And in Helvetica, let's say I want to go with a bold. And let's say that I want this to be quite a bit bigger. Why aren't you getting bigger on it for me here? Oh, I was doing my leading. Let's put that back the way it was. And let's bump that up to a 16. Okay, or no, let's do a 14. That's good enough. Okay, and in fact, let's add one more element to it. Let's say that we also want it to be this dark blue. Okay, so now I've got this formatting that I want for my headers, and I've got this formatting I want for my bodies. Now, I want to use this header formatting on all my headers, and I want to use the body and header formatting on this other text box over here. This is where styles are going to come in so useful. Okay, so we're going to start off by talking about paragraph styles. Now, paragraph styles are going to be the ones that we use really the most often. They apply a formatting to an entire paragraph at least. Okay, and you can go more than one paragraph, obviously, but at least a paragraph at a time. So I'm going to go here, and I'm just going to put my cursor. I can either select it, or I can put my cursor in this text here. I'll just select it. Actually, I'll just select all this one to the next header. I'm going to select that text, and I'm going to come over to my paragraph styles, and there's two ways I could go about doing this. I could click on this new style right here, and you'll see it's created a new style here called Paragraph Style 1. Okay? Now, just because I've made a new style doesn't mean it's applied that style. You can see how my text here is still technically this basic format, and then it has a plus sign at the end. The plus sign means you've made some changes. So it's saying, okay, well, I've made a new paragraph style based on what you selected, but what you've selected is still basic paragraph with some changes made. So if I come and click on this, it'll change it and say that I've now applied that style to this. And then I can double click on this in order to name it. And I'll call this one body. Now I'm going to tell you right off, that's the longer, more complicated way to do it. And I'm going to show you the easier way when I do the header style. But for now, in that longer, more complicated way, I've made a style called body. Now what I want to do at this point is I want to apply that style called body to any places that I want to use the body style. So I select it and I click on body. Now these ones were already formatted that way, so I didn't see a big difference. But watch what happens when I come over here. I'm going to select that, I'm just going to click body. And you'll see that it changed all the formatting for me without me having to actually make any individual changes. I don't have to go in and set the font and set the leading and set the size and set the space between paragraphs. That's all tied to the body style. The body style knows it's this font, it's this size, it's this everything. And so just by selecting body, it puts all that formatting on there for me. Okay? Now, let's do the headers, but let's do this in the easier way rather than the way I did it the first time. So this time I'm going to select the header one that has the formatting that I want to use for the style. I've already set that formatting. This is the formatting I want to use for my headers. This time, instead of just clicking that new style thing, I'm going to hold down the Option key. And if you're on a Windows computer, you're going to hold down the Alt key while I click it. So I'm holding Option or Alt, and I click that style, and it's just going to open up that thing that came up when I double-clicked it right from the get-go. Okay? And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to name the style under Style Name. We'll just call this Headers. And then I'm going to click this little box here that says Apply the Style to the selection. And that's going to make it so that this one automatically gets made a header rather than it being that basic formatting and me having to apply it afterward. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now I've got this header 1 style, or this header style. And I'm going to come here and I'm just going to apply that to all of my headers. And you'll see, so here I'm not having to do any individual formatting. I'm just coming in and selecting it and saying these are supposed to be headers. And it's going ahead and doing all of that formatting for me. So it allows me to get consistency in my formatting without needing to actually make sure that I'm remembering all the little changes that I made to my formatting. Rather than accidentally forgetting to apply the change in leading on one of these paragraphs and it not looking right compared to the other, I don't need to worry about that. All I need to remember is that that paragraph is supposed to be a body style and apply it, and it does everything for me. Okay? So there's one huge advantage to using styles. Well, actually, two huge advantages in styles. One is consistency. Everything that's supposed to be that style is going to be exactly the same. You're going to get that repetition you want. And then two is speed, right? I don't have to go in and make all those changes individually. I just need to set it up once and then apply it everywhere I need it, and it's done for me. Don't need to worry about how long it's going to take. Okay? So there's two reasons to use styles. Here's a third reason to use styles, though, and this is a big one. Let's say later I change my mind about something, okay? let's say that I'm here, I'm looking at my headers and I'm like, you know what, I don't like that formatting for the headers. There, I can change that within the style, and it will change every single place where that style is applied. And there's two ways I can do that. Here's one of them. Let's say that I'm just playing around with it on the actual document. I'm going to come here and just select header 1. I'm going to say I'm not loving Helvetica for that. Let's go take a look at a couple other options. Maybe I want to use Gotham Rounded. Okay. And let's go with a bold, looks good for that. But let's make it quite a bit bigger. Go to a 16. And I'm not loving the dark blue. Let's see what that looks like as a pink. And I'm like, perfect. That's how I actually want it. Well, I'm going to select that one that I changed the formatting on, and I'm going to come over to here, my paragraph styles. And you can see that it says that it's on the headers style, but there's a plus sign now. That plus sign means you made some changes. It's saying this is the header style, that's what was on it originally, but you've changed some things. If I hadn't wanted those changes, I could just hover on it. Oh, why aren't you popping up for me? There we go. It tells me what the changes were. See, it says overrides. You change the color to this. You change the 16-point size. You change the font to Gotham Rounded. I could just hold down Option or Alt and click on this, and it would put it right back to the way it was supposed to be in the first place. But I do want these changes. I want this to be the way it is. So I'm going to click on the menu in the upper right of this paragraph styles panel, and I'm going to choose this one here that says Redefine Style. And what this is saying is make this style have the definition of what I have selected right now. And when I do that, you're going to see that all of my headers change to look that way because I just redefined the header style to be what I had selected here. Okay, so that's one way that I can change a style and have it apply to everything. Another way I can do that, though, is I can actually go right into the style itself. I can come over here in the paragraph styles and I can double click on body, for example. Here's everything that is the body style. Over here, basic character formats. That's the family. There's the font style. There's the size. There's the leading. I can see what my tabs are like. Here's my indents and spacing. It's left indented. So for example, let's say I'm like, you know what? I actually want this to be left justified. I'm going to change that there, and I'm going to click OK. And now all of my body text is left justified. Okay? So again, a huge time saver. Once I've gone and formatted everything, which had already saved me time when I did that original formatting in the first place, now if I see things that I want to change or things that I want to play around with, I don't have to go and change it in every single place that I have that formatting. I can just change the style, and it's changed everywhere. Okay? So that's the basics of paragraph styles. Any questions at all about those things, how to create the styles and how to change the styles and why we use the styles? All right. Well, let's talk next about what we are, what the difference is between a paragraph style and a character style. So see, I've got two here, paragraph, character, right? So let's just say that I want to add some emphasis to a few select words throughout this document. I'm going to select the document, and I'm going to say, okay, for my emphasis, I'm going to make it bold italic, and I'm going to make it red. Okay, so here's my emphasized word, bold and italic and red. Well, if I select that and I come over here and I make a body or paragraph style out of that, I'm going to hold down Option or Alt on a Windows computer and click New Style, and we'll call this emphasis. And I'm not going to apply the style to selection because I want you to see what happens. So now when I come over here and say, let's emphasize this word, I'm going to go to my paragraph style and click emphasis, and it just changed the entire paragraph. Okay? So again, paragraph styles are going to apply the style to every single place up until you hit return, up until the next return. It's going to have that style apply. So for things like bodies or for subheadings or headers, makes perfect sense because it's always going to go until the next place you return at least. But for something like emphasis, I'm going to delete that one, that doesn't make any sense at all. Character styles allow us to just make a style that applies to whatever you've selected, whatever characters you have selected, it applies it to. Character styles also don't have as many options. So if I hold down Option or Alt and make a new style, you'll see that it only looks at these specific things. It's basically stuff from the character panel. Paragraph styles look at stuff from the character panel and the paragraph panel and all the formatting you would apply to a paragraph, where character styles are a little simpler. But for an emphasis, that's perfect. I'm going to come and select this word here. I'm going to hold down Option or Alt and make a new character style. I'm going to call this one emphasis. I'm going to apply this to the selection so it goes to the word I have emphasized. Then I can go around and select other words I want to emphasize and just click emphasis. And it goes ahead and takes care of giving it all the formatting that I've decided should be used on emphasized words. Okay? So those are paragraph styles, those are character styles, and styles as a whole. Any questions at all on working with styles? All right. So, and next week we're going to use styles in a little bit of, we're going to use them in the same way we're going to start from a different route where I give you all the settings for the styles from the beginning, and you'll see how much easier that makes the assignment next week as well. But for this week, you're creating your own. You're going to come up with how you would like to format those. So let me do an example then of how I might utilize styles in a menu scenario. I'm going to come here, I'm just going to make a new document. And let's come here and just make a text frame. Actually, before I do this, I don't want to forget, there's one thing with text frames that I want to make sure that you are aware of. Actually, let me double check something here. No, never mind. We'll talk about that next week. For now, this is fine. So let's go here and let's set up a text frame. And I'm going to kind of put in a couple of just basic categories in their items, right? So we'll start with soups. And we'll say that we have a tomato soup. Now after tomato soup, we'll just do tomato. I'm going to hit tab. And I'm going to show you in a minute why I hit tab. We're going to use that for something special. So let's say that the tomato soup is $4. And we'll say rich and creamy. This is sure to warm you up on a rainy day. Okay, there's my description. Now my next soup I have is a French onion soup. I'm going to hit tab after that, and I'm going to say that the French onion soup is $5. And we'll say, just like you'd get in Paris, our chef uses only the best onions to create this savory favorite. And then our last soup we're going to put in here is a chicken noodle. I'm going to tab again, and I'm going to say that the chicken noodle soup is also $5. And we'll say, whether you're under the weather or filling in your prime, this is a comfort food for any day. All right, so there's my soups. Now I'm going to just create a second category. It's going to be salads. I'll just put one salad in here. Let's say that we have a Caesar salad. And we'll say crisp romaine and our chef's house-made dressing. Make this the best Caesar, whoops, wrong spelling, in town. All right. Oh, didn't get a price for that, so I'm going to go back there and hit a tab, and we're going to say that the Caesar salad is $4. So here I've got just my basic elements of my menu, or a couple of sections of my menu. So now let's look at how we want to format this. But before I go too far, we're going to talk about tabs and something we can do with tabs. Again, like I said earlier, we don't want to use tabs for a first line indent in a page layout program like this. But tabs are very useful for other things. But first of all, I want to talk about what tabs do, because a lot of people don't quite understand what they're actually doing. Tabs will automatically increase, like put an indent or move the next item to the next, by default, ½ inch. It changes based on the settings. You're going to see I can set that to whatever I want, but the default is a ½ inch. But it's not a ½ inch of space between where you hit the tab and where it goes. Like, for example, you'll notice that tomato, there's a huge gap until it gets to $4, and French onion, there's a tiny gap until it gets to $5. But $4 and $5 are perfectly aligned. That's because it moves it to the next ½ inch on the menu, or on the the ruler. Okay, so you can see at 1½ inches on the ruler, that's where these three are falling. Well, the chicken noodle goes out further than 1/2 inch, so this one jumps out to the 2-inch mark. Okay, that's what tab is doing by default, though. It's pushing something out to the next ½ inch mark on the ruler. All right, does that make sense? Okay, so, and we're going to utilize that in a minute, but let's start formatting this. Let's say that I'm looking at my section headings, and I decide that I'm going to use that Gotham rounded again. I'm going to make these nice and big. Let's go to a 24, and let's go to a bold. And these I'm going to make a nice bright blue. And I'm going to go to my paragraph panel, and I'm going to add just the tiniest bit of space. I don't want a lot of space, but just a little bit of space before the first item of that section. Okay, now let's go to my item, my first item on the menu. I'm going to utilize some repetition. I'm going to go with the exact same font, so Gotham rounded. I'm going to go with a medium, though, so it's not quite as thick as the headline was, or the category of the food. And then I'm going to do something that's called leaders. Okay. Now you guys have probably already seen this before. I've seen this quite often. I'm going to use a different text box over here to show the reason for them and why you don't want to do them a certain day. Let's say that I have tomato right here, and I have French onion right here. It's probably, you've probably seen before, I'm sure, in tables of contents and menus where you have a bunch of little dots, and then it goes out to the price. So I am doing this the absolute wrong way right now, and by putting a bunch of periods for being that dots. But I don't want to do it this way, and I'm doing it this way to show you why I don't want to do it this way. Notice that my $4 and $5 don't align quite right? They're not quite aligned with each other. The reason why is that because the word tomato and the word French onion don't hit at the exact same measurement at the end, the dots don't hit at the exact same measurement, which makes these not hit at the exact same measurement. There's no way for me to align those except for just pure luck that the words line up right. If I take one away, it doesn't align that way. If I add one, it doesn't align that way. So I'm stuck where it's not aligning correctly. Not to mention that putting in those periods, it's not take a long time, but if I'm doing it every single time, that's going to add up to quite a bit of time, putting in those stupid periods for each one of those items. Okay? So let's look instead at the right way to do this. The right way to do this is using something called tabs and leaders. Now, leaders is what those little dots are called, and sometimes it's not dots. Sometimes they use dashes or other things. But anything that's that like actual character moving along a space to connect the two sides of it, that's called leaders. And the way that I'm going to adjust those to the way that I want them adjusted, I'm going to use something called the tabs panel. And so I'm going to start by selecting the text box I want to use. And I'm going to go to type, and I'm going to click on tabs. And you'll see that put this tabs panel right on top of my text box even to the point where the ruler is lined up perfectly with the text box. Now, if I'd forgotten to select this first and I'd brought it out, and let's just say that it opened up over here, I can fix that easily by just selecting the paragraph I want to use and then clicking this magnet. And that magnet will pop it right up on top of the paragraph or the text box that I've selected. So that's the first thing I want to do. I want to bring out my tabs panel. Now on my tabs panel, I have a ruler. This ruler, if there's nothing on it at all, then the tabs are going to go every ½ inch, like I said. But I can click just above this ruler to set places where I want the tab to go. Maybe I want the first tab to go to 2 inches instead of ½ inch. After that, maybe I want it to go to 2.5, and then all the way to 3.5. Now watch, when I hit tab again down here, next one goes to 2.5, next one to 3.5. Each of these little arrows tells it where my next tab is going to go to, rather than that default ½ inch every time. If I don't want one, I can just pull it right off the ruler like that. Whoops, and set it back to the default. So in this case, I want to set a tab so that when you click on this, it's going to automatically jump it out near the end. I've got these extra ones on there still. Let's select that and get rid of them. Whoa, had my text box selected. Undo is a very good friend in here. Undo just Command Z or Control Z if you're on a Windows computer. So now I've set this tab so that when I hit tab, one tab jumps it all the way out to the 3.5 mark. Now if I want to be specific, notice when I click that, it's actually 3.4861. I can just type it in here. I don't have to actually click above the menu. I can just say I want it to go to the 3.5 inch mark. Okay. So by doing that, you'll see that all of my tabs in this entire text box moved out to that point. Now, if I'd had the cursor in on this one, it would only do it to that one, and I'd have to do it for every single individual one. But since I've selected the whole text frame, it's doing it for all of them at once. So now let's add some leaders. This box right here says leader. I'm going to go ahead and just put a period in there and hit tab, and you'll see that it goes ahead and adds those leaders in there. You can also do a period and a space, and then the leaders are a little further apart. You can put whatever characters you want in that leader section, and it will repeat them all the way across until the end of your tab. So now I have this tabs and leaders the way I want it, where they're moving out to that end, and I've got these dots in between them, and I've got it perfectly aligned. Okay? So any questions on working with tabs and leaders? All right. Well, let's continue formatting then. The last thing I need to format is just my descriptions. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say that I want my descriptions to be Iowan, old style. I'm going to say that I want them a tiny bit smaller, 11 point. I'm going to go to my paragraph panel, and I'm going to give them a little bit of a left indent. And I want to go to my paragraph panel also, and I want to add a little bit of space after each one. Okay. And there I've got that. Now, let's say, so I've added, let's do a little less space actually on that. I've added this point, 0.625 inches after each one of these and after that header. For headers going forward, I'd like to have some space above them too, so that the next category header is far away from the bottom of this category. So I'm going to go to my paragraph panel, and I'm going to add space above here. I'm going to go all the way out to, well, let's even go further than that. Let's go to 1/4 inch. Now notice it didn't move this one because there's nothing actually above it to push away from. So that's how I want this. But I've got it set so that the formatting for this is to put 1/4 inch of space above it, between it and any text above it. All right, now that I have this all formatted the way I want it, I'm just going to create some styles. I'm going to select soups, go to my paragraph styles, hold down Option or Alt, and make a new style. I'm going to call this my categories. I'm going to click that I want to apply this style to this selection, and I'm going to click OK. Now let's go into here, select that, go to my paragraph styles, held down Option or Alt, call this one item names. It's already checked apply to selection. I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to come here and I'm going to go to my paragraph styles and make a new one. And I'll call this one item descriptions. Make sure that's checked. Click OK. Now I've got these 3 styles. So from here, I'm just going to select in there, say this is an item name, select in there, say it's an item description, item name, item description, category, item name, item description. So can you see just how much time that saved me after setting up my initial decisions for the formatting for that text, applying that text to everything else it needed to be applied to, or applying that formatting to everything else it needed to be applied to, was so fast. And I only did that for these few items. If I have a whole menu of items to apply this to, that's going to save me a significant amount of time. Plus, like I talked about earlier, now I have the option to go in and change things. I can go in here and say, you know what, I'd actually like the font for this to be a little different. Maybe I decide that I want my item names. Let's go and look at my item names, and let's go to my character color. And let's say that I'm like, you know what, let's get a little more colorful for the names. Let's see what it looks like as a pink. I can click preview and see what that'll look like with all my item names being pink. And there we go. They all changed for me. Okay. Another option is maybe I want to format the prices a little differently. Maybe I'm going to go here and make these a medium italic, make them a little bigger. Then I could come and set up a character style because I don't want to do a paragraph style or it's going to adjust that whole line. So I'm going to go in here and make a character style for prices. And now I can just go select my prices. And adjust all their formatting that fast. Okay. Maybe I decide, you know, I kind of like just the prices being that color. So I'm going to go to my paragraph styles and I'm going to double click on my item descriptions and I'm going to change this back to black. Oh, actually the descriptions, I meant names. Let's go to item names and change that back to black. And then I'm going to go to my character styles and I'm going to double click on the prices and I'm going to say, I want you guys to be pink. So I've got all this control and speed in making sure that I can make adjustments as necessary without losing repetition, without making mistakes in adjusting that formatting. Okay. So any questions on that? Everyone clear on how you would use those when you're doing your inner page of your menu? And again, while I was doing this, I was keeping those principles in mind. You know, contrast. My soups and my salads have a nice contrast. Alignment. I was keeping my proximity, keeping things together that go together in mind. And my repetition, keeping the formatting for specific types of things the same. Yes, that's exactly right. So the question is, in this assignment, are we required to make styles? Yes. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of amendments. The way they word it in the assignment, I disagree with a little bit, so I'm going to go through that. But let's jump in. Actually, yeah, let's just look at the assignment right now, and then we'll look at the discussion and the assessment. So on our assignment, we are creating we're choosing one of our menu covers, and then we're creating an inner page to go along with that menu cover. Okay, so if you scroll down here to the prompt, make sure and read the background. We'll scroll down to the prompt. The first thing you're going to want to do is get your document ready, you know, for you to start working with. So I'm going to go ahead and just close this, and we're going to pretend that I am looking at. So here's the document I gave you demonstrations on last week. since I don't have a finished menu cover to use, we're gonna pretend that these are my menu covers. So let's just say that here's menu cover 1, and then this one is menu cover 2. Excuse me. I'm going to save this, and I'll call this week 1 assignment. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do, you're going to go to your week 1 assignment and open it up. Doesn't want to open when it's down there. There we go. You're going to open your week 1 assignment, okay? And then you're going to duplicate it. So you're going to go File, and you're going to go Save As, and you're going to call this, you know, whatever you call it, but with week 2 instead of week 1, right? To designate it. And you're going to go ahead and click Save. Make sure you're not saving this in your package from week 1. Make sure because it's going to save wherever you opened it from, so you might want to go out, you know, if you opened it from inside the package, you know, go out to whatever folder you want to save it in. And I'm going to click Save. And now you'll see that I've got 2 of them here. I've got the week 1 one, and I've got the week 2 one. And if you go and look at the tab that I have open in InDesign, you'll see that what I'm working on is the week 2 one. When I do Save To, or Save As, it leaves the original one the way it was, makes a new one, and what you're working on is the new one, okay? So I'm all ready to start working on my inner page now. So now I need to choose which one of these I'm going to use as my menu cover, unless I specifically told you in the feedback which one you should use. So let's just say I decide, well, I want to use this yellow one as my menu cover. Well, what you want to do is we need to get rid of the pink one, but we need an extra page for page 2 to do an inner page on. So this is really easy to do using the Pages panel. We're going to talk a lot more about the Pages panel next week, but for this week, just see that down here you've got each individual page of your document. Here's page 1, here's page 2. I want to keep page 2. I don't want page 1 anymore. I'm going to click on page 1 to select it, then I'm going to come down here to this garbage can, and I'm going to click that, and it's going to say, are you sure you want to delete that page? Yep. Now I've just got one page, the one that I wanted to use. Then I'm going to come down here to the Pages panel and click on this Create New Page button. It looks kind of like a sticky note. Now I got a blank page ready for my inner page. Okay, so that's the beginning. You know, make a copy, save as, so you've got a document to work on with week 2 without losing your week 1 one. And then pick the one you want to use, go into the Pages panel, delete the one you don't want to use, and add a new page for your inner page. Any questions on that? All right. Now that I have the inner page made, or the inner page ready to go, the next thing I want to do is make any revisions to the cover from the critique that I gave you last week. That's 20 points of this. So go read through the things that if you lost points or anything, make changes so this is, you know, ready to submit with the changes made. Then you're going to create an inner page. There's some requirements for this inner page. All the text that it gives you, so if I come down here and I download the Maxwell's assets, if you already have the ones from last week, you don't need to re-download them. It's the same thing. All right. So here in the Maxwell's assets, we've got this page called Maxwell's menu text. All this text needs to be included. Now, it needs to go on one page. So it's a lot of text. You need to be thinking how to format, how to lay it out so that it works well and isn't too crowded on that page. You don't want to go to 2 inner pages. This should all fit on one page. Okay? And you've got things like categories, beginnings, from the sea, USDA prime beef, specialties, endings, and you've got your item names, you've got item descriptions, you've got prices. So all the same sort of elements we were just working with in our example. So it needs to include all that text. It needs to include at least 2 photos. Now you can use, like I said last week, you can use the ones that were provided, or you can find your own. That pexels.com site that I showed you last week is a good place to do that. But you need to have at least 2 photos. Now this says you need to have paragraph style sheets and character style sheets. I'm not going to dock you grades if you don't have both. You need to have the styles set the way they should be set for your design. So it'd be very easy for you to have a design that didn't need any character styles, that just needed paragraph styles. But you need to have a paragraph style for every different type of formatting. So you can't just make one paragraph style sheet that's for the body text and then just manually change everything else and call it good. You need to have a paragraph style sheet for each different section, each different formatting of text. Okay. The story asks, do we need to make 2 different menus to match the menu covers from last week? No, you're just picking one menu cover that you want to go forward with this week. If, you know, in a hypothetical situation, it would be that you showed it to the client chose the one they want, and now you're doing the inner page to go along with that cover. Okay. But anyway, so you need to have, you know, paragraph and or character style sheets that are, you know, enough of them to cover all the different formatting you've used on your inner page. Now, and if you get confused by that, the demonstration I just gave is a really good way to do it. Having category styles, having a category style sheet, item name style sheet, and item description style sheet, that'll cover you really well. But you're obviously willing to change that however you'd like to for your style or for your design, but you need to have a style sheet to cover every type of formatting. All right, and then we've got tabs with leaders, okay? So I'm not gonna require that. If the way I'm gonna work, because some designs don't look good with leaders, some designs don't have it all formatted to the right, and that's fine. But if you do use that, if you do have your text all, you know, distanced and right aligned, the prices, you need to use the tabs for that. If you do have dots, you need to use leaders. I will deduct points if you've just got a bunch of periods going across it, but I won't deduct points if you just decided not, you know, just to have the price next to the item name. That's fine too. Okay. And then you need to apply the CRAP principles. So you want to be thinking of contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity in order to, so it's easy for me to see, oh, here's the item categories, here's the item names. You don't want it to all blend together. Okay. So make sure you're not copying the example. That'll get you a really low score on the creativity score. And then when you're done, you're going to make a package of it just like you did last week, and you're going to zip that package and submit the finished package. And that's it for the assignment. So it's going to be a 2-page document with one cover, the one that you made revisions on based on the feedback, and then one inner page using styles and having at least 2 photographs. Any questions on that? All right. Then let's take a look at our discussion for this week. Our discussion for this week is actually about style sheets. And one thing can be really confusing, and I want to make this point out right away. If you Google style sheets, you're very likely to come up with hits on something that are called CSS styles. CSS styles are similar, but they're used specifically in web design. They're not, it's not what InDesign uses, but they are how like, you know, for example, this is a CSS style, this is a CSS style, you know, this is like, these are the same, header style. The body style is another style, so that I can apply styles on a web format to get the same results. But specifically for this assignment, we want to talk about the way they're utilized in InDesign. So in the prompt, it says, in today's discussion, we learned about how to use style sheets to make layouts consistent and to apply 2 principles of design, repetition and alignment. Do you feel that restricting yourself by using styles hinders your creativity? And then then go find an example where you feel style sheets were used, but where it's still unique and creative. You're going to locate 3 places on that layout and tell us what type of style sheet you think might have been used, like it was a character style or a paragraph style, and how it supports the principle of repetition or alignment of both. Okay. Now, I'll show you a really great way to find these examples. If you come over here and do a Google search for, let's say, magazine spread, and then click on images. So magazine spreads almost always use a lot of styles. And so you can kind of look through these and then find, you can say, okay, so, you know, I think that this would have definitely used styles. Now, for this headline, there would have been two different styles, right? There could have been a paragraph style that did one of these, and then a character style that was maybe bold, that they did on just those lines. Or there could have been just two character styles that they selected one line at a time. Down here, they would have had a body style for this body text, but the first paragraph's different. So maybe they had a character style to make that H jump up like that. Maybe they had a paragraph style to do this, little like subtext underneath the heading. And maybe they had here's a pull quote over here. They would add a different style for the pull quotes, and then maybe a character style to make that quotation mark so big like that. Okay, so if you look through these magazine spreads, you'll find a lot of examples, a lot of places that you can pick from to find, to talk about the styles they used. Another place to find it if you don't want to do magazine spreads is if you just look at print ads. Print ads use a lot of styles as well. Okay, so those are a couple of good places you can use to find examples for you to post in the discussion for this week. But you're going to talk about, again, do you think using styles hinders your creativity? Then you're going to post an example you find and talk about 3 places in the layout that you think styles would have been used and what type of style that would have been, character or paragraph, and how it would have supported the principles of repetition or alignment or both. Okay, so any questions on the topic for this week's discussion? All right. And then just like last week, our initial posts need to be at least 150 words and have 1 citation. And it needs to be done by Wednesday at 11:59 p.m., so tomorrow 11:59 p.m. And then you need to reply to at least 2 of your classmates' posts, and those replies need to be at least 50 words long and add to the conversation. And then make sure you're doing those replies on at least, doing something, I should say, on at least 2 days of the week, rather than all 3 of those being done on the same day. And then you need to have the responses done by at least Saturday at 11:59 p.m. Okay? All right, so that leads us to our assessment. And this week, the assessment is another quiz. This one is on the principles and on the elements of design. And so you want to make sure to go and, you've watched this one. Now you want to make sure to go and watch the other class recording, the pre-recorded one, that will cover some of the things that you need to know in this quiz. But this quiz specifically talks about the text frame properties and how to create and link columns. And I'll give you a little demonstration of that real quick before we go. And then how to create a package, basically, how to apply paragraph and character styles, and then the 4 principles of design and the 5 elements of design as well. All right. So before we go, let me show you that thing that was just mentioned there about linking paragraphs, linking text frames, I should say. And this is something you're going to see, we're going to be using next week. I'm going to go here to this document, though, and I'm going to make it so that I have 3 columns in this document and click Create. Now you can see I've got these 3 columns with these gutters in between those columns. So I'm going to create a text frame, and a lot of times when we're doing an article, the text is going to flow from one of these columns to the next. What I don't want to do is I don't want to manually do that. I don't want to have to copy and paste the text that's going to be in this column, then do the text that's going to be in the next column, then do the text that's going to be in the next column. That's a lot of work, and it also opens up a lot of possibility for mistakes. So what I want to do is I want to link these columns so that the text flows from one column to the next. And there are a couple of ways to do that. So we'll look at one way first and then the other way. So I've created this text box that fills the first column. I'm going to close the text box so I'm not actually editing it by hitting Escape on my keyboard. And now I can just see the text frame itself. Down in the lower right, not the very bottom box that I used to resize this, but the one just above that. It's a little bit bigger. That's the one that the red plus sign goes in when there's too much text to fit in the box. I'm going to click on that. And when I do, it's going to change my cursor to look kind of like very small text. And then I'm going to come over here to the next column. I'm going to draw another text frame. And by doing that, I have linked these two text frames. And I can show you, I can put the cursor in the first one and then go to type and say fill with placeholder text. And you'll see that it flows through the bottom of this one and over to the next one. If I come here and I start deleting text on this text frame, you'll see that it flows up out of the top of the next one. Right, they're connected and linked. So that's one way to link them. You create the first box and then click that square and then create the second one and link those. Another way to do it is you can create the text frames in the first place and then link them. So I've got these two done and they're already linked. I'm going to go and I'm just going to make a third text frame over here. And now I'm going to close that out by hitting escape on my keyboard. And I'm going to come click on the second text frame. And I'm going to come click on that same little box on the bottom, not the very bottom, but the one just above it. And I'm going to come and you see when I put my cursor on the third text frame, I get a little link symbol. And when I click on that, it links them. Now you'll see the boxes have little arrows in them now. That tells me they're linked. And there's a corresponding one on the top that tells me it links backward. Now I'm going to go and fill this with placeholder text. And it flows through all three of them. Okay, so that's how you can link text frames so the text flows from one to the next. And you can even do that on different pages as you'll learn in another class. I can have a text frame on page 2 linked to a text frame on page 7 for like in magazines where it says continued on page 7. And it will automatically flow the text from one place to the next. Any questions on that at all? All right. Well, then that's everything that I have to cover for today. Again, remember, we've got our multi-session on Thursday from 12:30 to 2:30 p.m. Mountain Time. So if you want some one-on-one help, be sure to come in then. And then we've also got all the other multi-sessions. We've got the schedule of our learning coach as well if that time doesn't work for you. Other than that, I look forward to seeing your submissions. You can email or call me if you have any questions as well. And I will see you guys again next Tuesday. Thank you. Have a great rest of your week.